Hello everyone, it's Monday the 24th of August and welcome to episode 85 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I'm your host Ben Eagle and I'm really excited to be bringing you today's feature interview. Before that though, let's take a look at some of the news stories from the past week. In the news this week, there's been gloom from some industry analysts who predict that poor cereal yields will make harvest 2020 one of the worst in the last 30 years. Wheat production across the UK is expected to fall below 10 million tonnes. To put that in perspective, last year the yield was 16.2 million tonnes and the 5-year average is around 15 million tonnes, though this won't come as a surprise to many arable farmers, pretty much all arable farmers. In Badger Cull news, DEFRA has confirmed that they will introduce no cull zones around vaccination sites in response to their latest consultation. The aim is to reduce the risk of culling badgers that have already been vaccinated. Finally, there's good news in that the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which gives eateries the option of offering a 50% discount on food and non-alcoholic drinks on Monday to Wednesday throughout August, has largely been heralded a great success, with pubs and restaurants across the land seeing increased business as a result. And that is the news for now. In the news. Let's turn now to our main interview of the week. This week I'm speaking to Monmouthshire farmer and the CEO of the Food Farming and Countryside Commission, Sue Pritchard. Don't forget you can watch the full-length interview along with chats with lots of other previous guests by searching for Meet the Farmers podcast on YouTube. It's Farmer Focus. This evening we're going to be talking big subjects. And I'm thrilled and privileged to be joined by somebody whose job it is to do this on a day-to-day basis. Sue Pritchard is CEO of the Food Farming and Countryside Commission, which is a new charitable organisation. It's very exciting to say that, set up to help implement the recommendations of their 2019 report, Our Future in the Land. We'll be diving into that very report during this chat, and I'll also be asking Sue why she does what she does and about her farm, because she's also a farmer, a Monmouthshire farmer, and has been for nearly 20 years. Sue, welcome to the show. It's really, really good to have you on here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
So am I. Obligatory 2020 question to start with, I suppose. I mean, how has the lockdown been for you, and how have you been impacted personally?
Well, it's been a kind of tale of two stories, I suppose. At one level, it's been surprisingly normal because I've been home since March the 9th. I ended up having to come home a little bit early because I was in contact with a person with corona. I didn't get it, so that was good. Okay. But I was home in early March, and so I was home for lambing, and that was good. It's been a while since I've been home to do my full stint all of the time. So everybody was very pleased to see me for that. And then we went from lambing into calving. And so all of that had kind of surprising normality about it. And you can, as you know, on a farm, you can get out, you can go for walks, you can kind of get round your place in a way that feels incredibly normal, even when the rest of the world is experiencing the crisis really differently. So at that level, there was a real normality about it, and actually it was a real pleasure to be home when I haven't been able to be for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But the other side of the story was, as you hinted in the introduction, it all coincided with the point at which we were leaving the RSA and setting ourselves up as a new institution. And so I've lived through this extraordinary experience of setting up a new body and recruiting several new members of my team without ever having met them. So it's a really weird experience. I don't know how tall my new deputy director is, for example. He's up in Northumberland, but it's also meant that we've been able to be, really quite serious about our our new purpose, which is to be a proper national networked organisation, not a kind of London-based think tank. My team comes from all over the UK. In fact, one of my team is moving to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging us in a good way to put into practice some of the things that we've talked about doing for a little while. That's been really, really interesting. And it's been a really nice thing to be able to do, to give people the certainty of another 3 years work, my existing team, and for the new team I've been recruiting, being able to go out and recruit for work in the sector when lots of people have been facing uncertainty. That's been a really, really lovely thing to be able to do. And so far, touch wood, it seems to be working reasonably well.
Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I grew up in the Welsh Valleys, first in the Rhondda Valley and then in the Rhymney Valley. My father's family were either miners or smallholders, and my father went down the mines, so he went in that direction. Other members of my family have kept interests in smallholding going. One of my cousins is a champion. Well, my grandfather and my great-grandfather were champion horse breeders.
Okay.
Two of my cousins are champion horse breeders. Another of my cousins is a champion chicken breeder. And
wow.
so, but this is all deep in the Welsh Valleys.
Yeah.
This is not posh at all. So they, by and large, live in typical Welsh mining communities, terraced houses, and they keep their chickens and horses and ponies, away from home. So I grew up in that kind of world. I had a pony when I was a little girl. It was kept a mile away because we didn't have any land around the house, and I used to tootle off far too young, I think. I sometimes wonder what my parents were thinking of, letting me wander off in the mornings and at night with my little bucket of feed and my saddle and my bridle over my arm. It was ridiculous. So I grew up feeling part of both of those communities.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that now, so knowing a bit of where you went after that. So, I mean, you went to Bristol, like me, but later, yeah. And you studied social policy, which I can sort of see those influences. But why did you, and how did you come towards that choice?
So before I went to Bristol, I won a scholarship to Atlantic College. So I went from the Welsh Valleys to an international sixth form college on a scholarship, which was an extraordinarily life-changing experience. And that really did open my eyes to all sorts of things in the world. I think I'd come from a fairly feisty background. My family were, politically interested. We talked a lot about, politics and current affairs around the kitchen table. Then going to Atlantic College, where its mission was to develop a pattern of education for the needs of our time, but for peace and a sustainable future. So that was back in 1979-81. So it was quite a radical place to go at the time. And then, so going to university after that, I suppose I was very curious about how the world worked, what the structures were that kept the world as it was, kept society as it was, and I suppose perhaps more what you need to do to be able to change things. So I was a bit of a wild child at Bristol, and probably spent more time not in university than actually in university.
It's where the real learning is.
Yeah.
So that led on to your research career. Where does that drive and interest for research come from? So you've got that sort of radical independence, but also that real interest and that in the research side itself.
Yeah. So I think it is about a real curiosity about how the world works, why things are as they are. I'm a bit of a questioner. I tend not to take things for granted too easily. I suppose I like to challenge some of the kind of taken for granted assumptions that we often make about everyday things. And I suppose that curiosity took me into a number of different roles. So I have had a research career. I've been a research fellow at a number of different institutions, 4 now over the years. But I've worked as a consultant to businesses and organisations, and I've had public appointments. I was a non-executive director and the chair of a health board and a vice chair of a big educational charity. So I suppose research matters, and understanding how the world works really matters. But I'm also interested in putting that research into practice. I'm really interested in the relationship between theory and practice, policy and implementation. One of my kind of gurus as I was growing up used to say, it's not enough to be able to, it's not enough to know what is good, you have to be able to do it. And writing great policies or writing great papers doesn't really add up to very much if you can't do something with that, if you can't change the world for the better as a result of that. And I suppose that's always mattered to me, and the practical stuff has mattered more and more as I've got older. There was a time when writing a paper for publication felt like absolutely the bee's knees.
Yeah.
But now I'm really interested in what people are doing and what people are doing in their communities and their businesses, how they're kind of grappling with the big challenges they face, how they're responding to the enormous ambiguities and uncertainties that we're all having to live through at the moment. That's what really excites me, those sorts of stories.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose one example of that practicality is the farm in Monmouthshire. How did you end up there?
Well, you can guess from what I was saying earlier that farming was a bit in my blood, and my father's too. So my father had gone down the mines, but as a child and as a young man, he'd spent all of his summers on his uncle's farms. And it was one of the stories that we used to tell each other when I was a little girl. One day we'll have a farm. One day we'll have our farm, won't we, Daddy? And we hadn't ever got around to it. And I had one of those moments, one of those kind of blinding flashes of Bleeding Obvious, which was, if we didn't do this soon, we were never going to do it. And actually, we could do it. It wasn't a pipe dream. We could make this happen if we really wanted to. And so I talked to my parents about it, and talked to my family, my then husband, and we just decided to start looking. So we've first of all looked around at places in the countryside, just more rural homes for both of us. So I wanted to bring my parents with me, and we didn't really find anything we liked. It took 2 years, and we came to see this particular place. It didn't, on paper, it didn't have anything that we wanted. It was too small. It wasn't on the edge of a village. It just wasn't right. And I said to my parents, we're not going to go see it. It's not right. Look, it's just not right. And we couldn't have what we wanted. And in the end, my father said, let's just go see it. Let's just go see that one in Raglan. So we trundled down, my mum and my dad and I utterly fell in love with it as we were coming down the track. It's a long track down into a valley from the road, and it opens up as you come down the track. The track opens up onto the farm and the yard, and it's surrounded by trees, and it's cradled by the hills around it. It nestles in its place. It's 300 years old, a 300-year-old farm. Wow. It's his birthday next year, actually.
Oh, brilliant.
So we'll be having a party.
Fantastic.
And I thought, well, my parents are going to hate this, so I don't know why. I mean, I'm not going to love it. I'm not going to let myself love it. But oh God, this is perfect. And as I was looking around, the house is lovely, but I was thinking, oh God, all the fences are done. There's water in all the fields. Look at these brilliant barns. Oh my word. We left. I was waiting for my father to say, well, that's rubbish. And he bashed the dashboard and said, well, if that's not right for us, I don't know what will be. and that was it. And that was Fantastic. It. We were kind of committed, and it took 6 months to. We had all sorts of problems. We were selling 2 houses, and they kept falling through. And but the lovely people decided that we were the buyers they wanted, and they just waited for us to sort everything out. And we arrived here. Everything went wrong on moving day, and so we arrived late at night, and our furniture didn't come with us. Yeah. So we camped here with nothing. The kids all in one bedroom, and we were all sleeping on the floor with sleeping bags. And there was a bat in the bedroom, and nobody minded because it was just so exciting. And I came downstairs and sat down on the floor by the Arga, which was warm, luckily, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and thought, I'm done. This is it now. I'm done. I'm here, and not lost that feeling
Oh,
really.
fantastic. So Food
Yeah.
Farming Countryside Commission, you already had a link with the RSA in some capacity?
Well, I was a fellow. I'd been a fellow for about
Right.
15 years,
Okay.
and so I was involved in fellowship activities. But it's quite an arm's length relationship. But the RSA is it's an eminent body. It's not far off 300 years old as well. Actually, it's about 270 years old. So it's got a real provenance about it, and that was important for the Commission's work. It was important to have that weight and gravitas, I think, to help us guide our work.
Yeah. And what attracted you to the role in the first place?
Oh God, well, it was my dream job. It was my absolute dream job. So, as you indicated, I've been involved in researching work for decades, but I'd also been working with government projects. My main work prior to taking this on was working with the government major projects portfolio. And I was trying to help government understand a bit more about what kind of leadership was needed to work on some of these big, messy, kind of politically complicated projects. My God, we thought it was complicated in those days. It was a walk in the park compared to how things are at the moment.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the work I used to do. But of course, I was living on the farm and really caring about food and farming systems, about a more sustainable countryside, more sustainable futures all around. And so when I saw this job advertised, it was like all of my dream jobs were rolled into one. It was about shifting government policy. It was about influencing a topic that I cared really, really passionately about. It was being able to shape it in the way that I wanted to, leading that work. And at a time which felt really, really important. So thinking not just about policy post-Brexit, but also all of the other crises that we know that we had to deal with, the climate crisis, the nature crisis, the public health crisis. And I was able to throw myself into that work. I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do more. So I explained that to the panel, and luckily they agreed with me.
Let's pause on Our Future in the Land. If anyone hasn't read it, it is still available on the RSA website. It was published...
the Food Farming Countryside Commission website now.
Oh, on the Food Farming Countryside Commission website.
Yes,
Brilliant.
Yes, we've got a whole new website and whole new sets of pages. But we have a library on there, and all of our reports and assets are available on so it's ffcc.co.uk.
There's the plug. We don't even need to do it at the end now. It was published on my birthday.
16th
of July 2019. And it is well worth a read. I read it at the time, and then I've read it again in the light of doing this. So, but you were writing that report, like you say, in the context of Brexit, but critically, you wanted to go beyond that. What were your aims in drawing it together, and did they remain coherent from the start to the end?
That last question is a really, really good question, because there are some people, I think, who assume that commissions are set up. They know what they want to say. They go through the motions and they put out the report that they wrote at the start anyway, at the end of it. I was absolutely determined that wasn't going to be the kind of commission that we would be, that we would enter into this process with a genuine spirit of inquiry and curiosity, to test some of our own assumptions, to explore what other people were thinking and doing, try and bring something together by the end that did justice to the contributions that people had made through the life of the commission and through the life of the inquiry. So we started off knowing that our mandate was to help shape a new vision for a more sustainable food and farming system and a flourishing countryside, and to bring in new voices and new perspectives into that inquiry.
Not a small thing to do.
It's not a little thing to do, no, not a little thing to do. We quickly realised that whilst Brexit was a big issue, it was but a moment in time compared to the bigger challenges for the country and the whole planet around climate and nature. We wanted to really strengthen the link and the understanding of the link between food and what we produce, how we produce it, what we eat, how we eat it, and our health and well-being. And I think we did a good job there. I think we really cemented that link and that relationship in the public's and policymakers' consciousness.
So, I mean, health clearly features prominently in the report, and it's a driver of one of your key recommendations. One thing that is mentioned is the government's 2017 flagship healthy eating campaign. And of course, well, not quite hot off the press, but pretty recently off the press, we've got the new obesity strategy. How much real benefit do you think that these governmental approaches actually have, as harking back to your practical on the ground minds? How much of a critic are you going to be to them, or do you think that they actually do have practical benefit?
Well, government policy, when it's working well, creates the conditions for our everyday actions. It can either help us do the right thing, or it can get in the way of us doing the right thing, or it can end up inadvertently supporting the wrong thing. So it is really, really important. Government policy really does matter. I think, as you saw in our reports, we're quite straight and quite clear about where we think the real opportunities lie, and we think there are many occasions where government does not do enough to level the playing field for a fair food system, and creates the conditions for some players in that system to benefit disproportionately, and doesn't support key players in the system to get a fair return for their work. So we have, I think, quite a clear analysis of where we think the issues are and where we point government toward. I mean, the government that we have at the moment, and have had actually for a couple of decades, has tended to take a rather hands-off approach to some of the big public health questions associated with food and diet-related illness. And it kind of falls back on the notion that nobody wants a nanny state. It's up to consumers to choose who we to tell people what to eat. And I find all of those arguments really unsatisfactory, because the reality is that government tells us what to do. In fact, we ask government to tell us what to do in all sorts of aspects of our lives. I mean, for clean water, clean air, we expect government to keep citizens safe, keep citizens healthy, protect citizens. That's what governments are for. It's what we participate in society for. But somehow we've given food a buy on those questions, and we've managed to get to a place where we have a global food system which is just no longer very good for us or for the planet. And that has to change, and that requires government to do some really quite serious things. Now, one of the things that I liked about Henry's Part 1 report, which I guess was quite a different report to the one that he was expecting to be able to write when he started. He wasn't anticipating the COVID-19 crisis, nor were many of us. And so what he's produced is of the moment, and it focuses on the two things that feel really, really important right now, which is about the health and well-being of children and the trade issues that are racing down the pike for us. So I suppose in setting the context, I think he does very well. I think he's got much more faith in the free market to make things work than I have. I don't think the free market has done a great job at sharing resources fairly and equitably, or protecting the planet, or indeed future generations.
Yeah, that's funny. You can sense that between the two. It's like, who's the voice here?
yes. So, but actually, I think he's been quite strong on some topics which I think are really, really important, like the importance of ensuring that children have access, easy, ready access to nutritious, healthy food, whatever their background, whatever their circumstances. One of the really awful realizations through the corona crisis is how fragile people's food security really is. And there are
absolutely
there's been a huge increase in food insecurity as a result of people just not having enough money to buy nutritious food, healthy food. And for those kids who were reliant on school meals, school lunches, when that was taken away, it's utterly heartbreaking to read some accounts where children were being admitted into hospital with malnutrition because they hadn't eaten properly for months. Now, in one of the richest countries in the world, one of the richest economies in the world, to have to say that kind of thing is it's scandalous, it's outrageous, and we should be furious about that. And I think Henry demonstrated in his report a really serious recognition that we can't carry on like that. So that was good. That was good. But I think he's got a lot more to do. He's left himself a lot to do in the run up now to the strategy itself, the proposals for the strategy itself.
Let's move on to the next section of the report. Farming is a force for change. You mentioned in that some farmers feel as if they're, quote, locked into the system. Why do you think they feel that way?
For decades, farmers have done what government policy has encouraged them to do, and have invested in good faith in the systems that let them do more of what government wants them to do. And that means often investing in big kit, in particular growing systems, in particular supply relationships. And it can be very hard to undo those, particularly if the thing that you're undoing them for doesn't require, lots of additional lending or lots of additional capital. You'll know in our report we talk a lot about agroecology and a transition to agroecological farming systems. And one of the core principles of agroecology is to do much less, to use fewer inputs, to use far fewer chemicals, to farm in harmony with nature. And that often means doing a lot less of the things that many farmers have become used to doing. And it can be difficult to shift out of that, either through the capital that's invested in current practices, or actually the confidence and the knowledge that some farmers have in what it means to farm differently.
You point to agroecology there in the report as the way, and you define that in the report as, quote, farming in ways that learn from, work with, and enhance natural systems. And you suggest in that the government should, as that should word, be designing a 10-year transition plan for sustainable agroecological farming by 2030. We're heading into a transition. There is still a heck of a lot of uncertainty there of what even the transition is going to look like, let alone where we are after that. But is it right that we should have the government do this at all? Can industry not lead the way by itself? You spoke a lot about partnership working before and during this interview.
Now, I'm so glad you asked me this question. I love this question. I've worked on government projects, as I mentioned earlier, for 20 years. And I've never, ever met another industry or another sector that says, we can do this without government support. We can do this without government assistance. What they will say, what the housing sector will say, what the transport sector will say, what the infrastructure or the energy sector will say is that we need government investment in these critical parts of our national infrastructure because they matter to everybody. But yet when we talk about food and farming, we talk about subsidies to farmers. And I think that is, that's a travesty. What we should be talking about is investment in the kind of food and farming system that we need as a country. And if that means that resources go to small and medium-sized enterprises, sometimes large enterprises, which is what farmers are, then that's the way it should be. Now, I think as farmers, we need to see ourselves more as part of a critical national infrastructure. Healthy food and healthy farming systems and healthy landscapes are absolutely critical for all of us. We all eat food. So I think we need to change the debate. I think we need to not be saying, can the industry do this on its own? We need to be saying, what is the food and farming system that this country needs? And what is the right investment in that infrastructure that helps us get from where we are to where we need to be for the benefit of the whole nation? Now, we're getting a bit closer to that when we're thinking about environmental land management schemes, about supporting farmers to do some of the work that the market won't pay for. But there's also, I think, a really strong argument to be made for government to help shift what is currently an ineffective market in food. The food market does not work at the moment. If it worked, we would not have those shaming statistics around food insecurity and ill health and malnutrition. So the market doesn't do it for us, and government needs to create the right conditions for this really critical part of our whole lives to work better for us all.
That segues beautifully into the final theme of your report, actually, and it exemplifies it as well, which is a countryside that works for all, which really relates to a wave of broad countryside issues and what to do about it. You call on establishing a national land use framework for England. I mean, again, brilliantly broad, but what does this mean in practice? And I assume this will be part of your ongoing work, but maybe a little bit further down the line.
Well, actually, no. Again, it's another of those things that we thought would be a bit provocative, but actually, it feels like a moment
Now is the right time.
has come. Yes.
Okay.
So people have been talking about this since 1949, and a land use. People have talked about land use strategy, and I think that's made people very nervous because lots of people, particularly people who own land, get very anxious and they think government is going to develop a strategy that's going to tell them what to do on their land. But again, England is unusual in not having a framework for land use in the world. Okay. Wales and Scotland have already made progress on those sorts of issues, but other countries take for granted that there's a strategic view about how those countries use their land. We found that when we stopped talking about a strategy and we started talking more about an enabling framework, people were able to let go of some of their anxieties. Okay. So everybody recognised that this was a really serious issue. We're on a pretty small island, and the demands on our land are greater and greater and greater. And we see what happens when we don't have good mediating frameworks to navigate some of the really polarizing debates, rewilding or food production, railways or houses, or space for nature, or beauty, leisure, tourism, beauty. Those are really complicated conversations that have to be worked through and mediated in a more thoughtful and sensitive and nuanced way. And at the moment, we do not have those mechanisms to do so. So we made that recommendation. We've been doing some further consultation this year before lockdown started. And the National Geospatial Commission published its strategy just a couple of months ago, and they have positioned a framework in their strategy. So we'll be working with them, particularly around local pilots, to see how does this work from the ground up. If we think of a framework as a set of principles that guide decisions on land across all of those different sectors who have an interest in it and citizens, then actually it stops being a top-down process. It becomes a bottom-up process too, where citizens can have a good think about what really, really works for them and what matters for them in the context of some bigger national principles. So it's showing up in the National Geospatial Commission strategy. There's some work going on in Cabinet Office at the moment to think about what that could actually look like. The National Infrastructure Commission is starting to talk about what a land use framework might contribute to its own challenges to green its portfolio somewhat. So the conversation is popping up in all sorts of places. And I think we're going to be piloting. Our first pilot will be in Devon.
Okay. On a personal level, did you learn anything in particular from the process of doing this particular report, this particular piece of research, as opposed to all the rest of the massive material that you have done in the past?
So much. And I continue to do so. From the incredible generosity and willingness of people all around the country to want to help in the inquiry, who wanted to participate and contribute to the inquiry. That was just joyful. When we set off on the bike and we started doing the work around the country, you do kind of wonder whether anybody's going to turn up or anybody really wants to talk. But people do. When you go out with that curiosity and a little bit of humility, actually, people really do want to contribute. They really do want to share their thinking and their perspectives and their ideas so that it can help.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. I suppose another thing that I've learned is that London is a long way from the countryside. And I mean, that sounds trite, but there are a lot of people in Whitehall and Westminster who have a very incomplete understanding of rural affairs, farming, and the countryside. Even people, I have to say, who have quite powerful positions in respect of those really, really big issues. And I was surprised by that. I was really surprised by that.
Okay.
But that means that with the right conversations and with the right opportunities, then we can create new conversations and opportunities for us all to learn a bit more about what really matters.
I admire your drive and optimism so much. These two questions at the end, which I ask everyone who comes on here, in the light of what we've been talking about, I'm fascinated to hear what responses you'll give, and they're probably quite broad. But the first one, if you had a message for the public, a single message, that's going to be hard. What would it be and why?
Actually, I mean, I think I pretty much have the same message for citizens, public, and farmers, which I know is the second part of the question.
We'll roll them together.
Which is, more than ever, what we do now matters. What we talk about matters. What we do matters. What we get involved with really, really matters. As a country, we're on the brink of some huge decisions about our future, about our place in the world, about the kind of country that we really want to be. And it is really, really important for people to get involved in those conversations, to get involved in those debates, to ask really good questions, and to make their voices heard, to require the kinds of information that we need in order to be able to step up to those huge challenges. And for farmers, really more than ever, what farmers do matters so much. As producers of our food, as stewards of our land, as guardians of our natural world that we are handing forward to future generations, I can't imagine anything I would rather be doing. I know that when the policy stuff changes, I come back to being a farmer. It's not a job that I do. It's the person that I am. It's who I am, and most of the farmers that I meet have the same relationship with that topic, and it matters. It is really, really critically important right now, perhaps more than ever.
Gosh, you give me a lump in my throat there. But we will leave it there. But Sue, I cannot thank you enough for your time and for giving us your views on such a wide diversity of subjects, for delving into your report. It's been a privilege to be able to do that with you. And I really look forward to seeing what your very exciting organisation does in the years ahead.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Ben. Thank you very much for having me.
It's Farmer Focus.
Sue Pritchard. Big thanks to Sue, and I strongly recommend, honestly, please do head to YouTube to watch the full-length version of that interview. There is so much more in there. It's just shy of an hour and a half, so if you have some time sometime this week, please do go over to YouTube and watch that. Just search for Meet the Farmers podcast, Sue Pritchard. That's it for this week, but thank you for joining me. Next week, we're sticking with the health theme, and I'll be talking to nutritionist and Nuffield scholar Barbara Bray. Until then, have a great week, and I'll see you next time.